Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Does that sound all right? Yeah. Yes. Everybody can hear me all the way in the back? Yeah. We're good? And all the millions listening online. Awesome to be able to present with you guys today. We're going to talk about what the Lean framework is. Bert had mentioned it was about Lean startups, but I think the Lean framework actually applies to more than just startup companies. That is the primary use case, and a lot of what we'll talk about is, this deck is kind of translated from that. But it's actually a way that you can approach problems in a smarter way to be able to identify who your customers are and make sure you're solving the right problem for the right person and you have the right team assembled. Does that make sense? Yeah. Right? So any of the 5 different ideas that are brought to us by our government pals, they're coming and saying, we need help in these areas, and you're going to be acting as a consultant. I say you, so most of my audience today, I see a lot of blue shirts, teal shirts, but for anybody that will have the video after, my presentation is geared towards the development, the technical teams, the engineers that are going to be focusing on these problems over the next 30 days or so. Okay? So that's just a little caveat. Our quick agenda is do a little bit of an intro background on myself, on Sultan Ventures and Accelerate UH. And Lean Framework, we'll talk about what the business model canvas is as the tool to document our learnings in the Lean Startup or Lean Framework. Market research, value propositions, customer segments, product market fit. We're going to really do like drinking water from a fire hydrant for now, all right? So I'm just going to go for it, and you guys can come back and revisit some of the material after. Feel free to interrupt if you can get a word in, but we'll do maybe some time for Q&A after as well. Does that sound good? Yes. Let's do it. So my name is Luke. I work with startups at Sultan Ventures and Accelerate UH, and we'll talk about those 2 entities real quick. I write on my blog at luketucker.com and find me on the Twitter. One quick promo for Empowered Presentations. Okay, I wrote a blog piece, and this guy Corey put together a deck overnight 5 months ago, and it's got 153,000 views on their SlideShare. Stay tuned to their presentation next, okay? They can take mediocre content and turn it into awesome content that people are going to share. Okay, so Sultan Ventures. We're a boutique venture fund based here in Honolulu. We're actually right across the street. Our offices look straight at Aloha Tower. So we're right at the Pioneer Plaza on the 18th floor. Come by, check us out, Suite 1888. We have 3 main focuses with startups, education, and the funds that we manage. We're going to talk a little bit about Accelerate UH just right after. We are actually have our cohort teams wrapping up their session now for their 16-week program. And we're very proud of the fact that we've been able to help startups raise over $15 million, actually up to $17 million over the last couple years. We do a podcast show, so if you're interested or have any kind of appetite for podcasts, you can check out sultanventures.com/podcast. And we've had about 20 different episodes from blue startups companies to companies from New York to Austin, all over the world, and entrepreneurs and investors about their stories or their catalysts that drove them to success or even failure, right? Because taking risks in startups is a lot about having an appetite for that failure. So Accelerate UH, we are a public-private partnership between Sultan Ventures and the University of Hawaii, and we are about educating and building up the entrepreneurs at the university. That includes students, faculty, alumni even, those that have want to go to OTED in the technology portfolio and commercialize some of the tech and build a startup around that. We have 2 tracks. We have an early stage $25,000 investment, as well as $50,000, and you can be eligible for a follow-on funding. Similar investment structures as a lot of other accelerators, if you're familiar with that. We're fortunate to be recognized by SBA, so we're an awardee for last year, as well as Economic Development Association gave us a $500,000 grant to help reach out to the other islands and do more workshops and things. So our mission, just to recap that, to foster that culture of innovation and entrepreneurship at the University of Hawaii. And some of our portfolio companies, so I'll just kind of pick out a couple of them. The black logo there is Morph Optics. It's a group of astrophysicists that are taking their perfect mirror technology for telescopes and applying it to the solar space so that you can actually have an economic possibility to put it on like these buildings in downtown Honolulu, because it can create enough power that it makes economic sense for that building, which is pretty awesome. And we got Cosmos, which is literally rocket scientists that are working on software that's being used in spaces with NASA and other entities like that. And the A in the bottom left is Algorithm Hub. They're based on Maui, so shout out to our neighbor island pals that are listening to online. They got an amazing team building essentially like GitHub, but with algorithms. And so Algorithmia is a similar company that are going after that space, and they got some incredible products. Their engineers worked at Boeing and had some other big names on there as well. Okay, so I told you it was like drinking water from a fire hydrant. I talk fast. We're going to dive right into what you're all here, hopefully, to learn a little bit about, and that's the lean framework. So, obviously, the first question, what is lean, right? What does that kind of mean? Well, just in terms of background, it kind of starts with this guy, Steve Blank. He wrote a book called The 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And I always say that he's the proud owner of the worst business cover ever. It makes no sense to me at all. I don't know where he got the inspiration or how the publishers allowed that to happen, but it did, and so it's very recognizable. When you're walking, you're like, oh gosh, what is that? That's the 4 steps to the epiphany. And he has a phrase kind of about continuous customer development. So this is getting out of the building, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that actually means for anybody that's applying the lean framework to their opportunity. A guy that came along that has a much better cover of his book and more branding to it, he wrote it called The Lean Startup. He actually took courses from Steve Blank when he was at Stanford, I think Stanford or Berkeley, and wrote that a couple years ago, probably maybe even 10 years ago now, I'm not sure, it's been a while. But that really popularized the lean startup kind of approach. And some of the most successful startups you may have heard of, Dropbox, Slack, even Airbnb, they have approached their problem solving using these concepts. Large corporations as well. Everybody heard of like lean manufacturing? So Toyota, right? They've taken the automobile, which was developed by somebody else, just optimized the processes, and have been able to create some of the best products that we've seen in that vertical. Okay, so back to that definition of what is lean. Well, I usually say it's applying the scientific method to startups. That's the shorter version. But the longer version that I kind of adjusted here today is applying the scientific method of problem solving to business and organization challenges. Okay, so same as like maybe in the lab, we talk about some of those scientists. They got Bunsen burners and beakers, right? They're running tests all the time. Well, we're coaching people that markets and customers are subject to testing as well. And that's what we're going to give you a playbook to do that in either any idea you have, whether it's a startup idea or any of these 5 ideas that are presented about the opportunities. I want to come back to that thing that anybody that's working with HACC for the next month, you are kind of a consultant with the government of the state of Hawaii, helping them solve some of these problems. And you need to identify if this is the right problem. Also, problem isolation. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but it's that important. I want to reiterate it. You need to focus on what problem you're going to solve and who you're going to solve it for, because you either get scope creep, you're going to get feature heavy, and you're not going to solve the real problem, right? We're all here. Nobody wants to build something that it's not getting used, right? Who wants to do that? Who wants to spend their hard-earned or time or whatever? Like, that's valuable. So we're going to talk about the HERO process. This is my forced mnemonic, okay? It spells hero because I had to move the action over. But it's hypothesis, experiment, results, and action, okay? So if you don't remember anything from today, I want you to remember this, okay? So it's the hypothesis, experiment, results, and action. It's that HERO process. So you're going to remember it. This is my trick, because it's like, that's ridiculous. It's HERA, really. But the guy is like, it's like hero, that's silly marketers for you. Hypothesis, experiment, results, and action can be distilled down into this model as well. We call it the build, measure, learn feedback loop. So when I'm going to come up here, so stay with the framework. So building, when you have an idea, you're up here, right? You have an idea first, and you want to just go straight to build and just ship the product. So we're going to tell you, get the idea and measurement. Remember we talked about testing a little bit. The Bunsen burners and beakers when it comes to products or customers and markets. You go out and you talk to your customers. That's a measurement. And then whatever you learn, you distill your learning and you change what you build. And it's an iterative process. So why do we do that? Well, in terms of startups, the reality is almost 66% or 2/3 of startups change or pivot from their original idea. Think about how powerful that is. When you actually think your ideas are great, who here thinks they got really good ideas? I know I do, right? Nobody's going to come and share their ideas. They're like, this is terrible. I have a great quote from a guy that I don't have it up today, but I'll share it with you real quick. He's done, I think, 99 designs. He did Hired.com. His name is Matt. And he basically says, these are really successful startup companies. He's like, when I have a new idea, I approach the idea as if I'm wrong. And I go out to prove otherwise. So it reverses the thinking to be like, I'm not going to be so prideful to think I know exactly what the market needs. I'm going to go out and test and get that feedback and build something that people are going to actually use. Does that make sense? Okay, so what's the goal? I kind of have been alluding to it, but we want to build things people will use once, and if it's a business, actually pay for, right? Because if you just have the product that people are using and nobody's eventually paying for it somehow, some way, then you don't have a business, you have a drain on your bank account or an investor's bank account. So to summarize real quick this overview, and then we're going to get into some of the practicalities, Lean allows us to eliminate uncertainty. It's going to let us work smarter, not just harder, because let's face it, it's going to be hard work, whether you're working on your own ideas or somebody else's problems that they're presenting to you. You want to be efficient with your time and money, be capital efficient. As an investor, I love it when someone comes and be like, we did this much with $5,000 and we got to all these different places. We already have 50,000 users, rather than coming and saying, I need $500,000 to go out and get my first user, right? It de-risks the idea. It minimizes the risk for the investor as well as you as the entrepreneur, or in this case, the ones that are going to be that consultant with the government, right? So save development time. You're going to save your time again, and in my view, I think you're going to stay healthier overall. You're going to minimize, the hair that's being lost, maybe the gray hairs that'll be creeping up. There's a guy named Ash Maurya, and I encourage anybody that's interested in this topic to check out his book. He kind of takes what the guy Eric Ries wrote in the Lean Startup and makes it really, really practical. He kind of boils it down to me in like plain English. So instead of like the ivory tower kind of like 4 steps to the epiphany, the Steve Blank, remember the guy with the terrible business book cover? Okay. Ash did this in real life, and he came out with a lot of good content that's very practical and talks in plain English. So he says running Lean, or this Lean framework, is that systematic process, okay, from iterating from that initial plan. Remember Matt saying, hey, my first idea is probably not that great. Let's go out and test that, to a plan that works before you run out of resources. That's what he is talking about, and we'll kind of rehash today. So the business model canvas, can I just get, by show of hands, a little participation here? Who here has heard of the business model canvas before? Just so I have kind of a... Okay, so maybe about a third of the room. The reason I decided to include it today is, as I kind of said earlier, it's a tool that we use to document our learnings of that build, measure, learn, that hero process, okay? And so it's a business plan on a page, basically, and I think I have that. I skipped ahead a couple slides about what that actually is, but it's 9 different things on a page, and I'm gonna show you how you can use this to validate or invalidate your assumptions. And the 3 that the 2 basically we're gonna talk about today is this value proposition box right in the middle, the customer segments, and the relationship between the 2. That's it. We're not gonna go over anything else except for showing you how you can take this business model canvas and approach it with any idea, okay? Now, the BMC is part of that systematic process. More than that, as I said, it's that way in which we document our learning. It's that business plan on a page. So, I can tell you're interested. You want to know, okay, how do I use it, right? Where do I start? It would be a little daunting just to take it up on a piece of paper. You don't know exactly what you're doing. And here's my recommendations. When you're going to start, you're going to just do it all at once. I would sit down with it, whatever your ideas that you have for these 5 different concepts here. I would recommend that you or your group just probably try and fill out this actual canvas. Again, it's not from a business necessarily like costs and revenue, but there is going to be some of those baseline components that will be involved with those activities as well. And so value prop to customer segments. What are your channels? Like, how does your product get to your customer? A channel would be a mobile web app. Or maybe it's going to be the iOS App Store because they got to download the app that you build on Apple's App Store. That's a channel. Revenue, costs, customer relationships, revenue, costs, and then all the keys that you're going to be on that other side of the canvas. So, like I said, this is more for you to take and do it on your own time, and we're only going to cover a few of the points. And this is the process recommendation for it to kind of go through, like I just articulated a second ago. You got to write it all down first. Then you're going to fill out the BMC, talk to potential customers. So those customer segments, the people that you think are either going to be your customers or the users of your product. You have maybe a list of a few questions and hypotheses. I'm going to go ask and see if I'm right. maybe just a sample size. If you talk to 10 people, that would make me happy before you start building this robust solution with 15 different features, because you think that whoever presented their problems knows exactly what they want. Don't assume. Assume that we might be a little bit wrong. Even if we're 80% right, let's just narrow down to what's the most important 1, 2, or 3 things. Does that sound like it kind of is, makes sense, right? I want to rinse and repeat. I want to come back to this. Right? Remember, the hero and the build, measure, learn are some of the things that I really want you to take away today. Build, measure, learn is an iterative process that you do throughout the product development life cycle. So it's a first step. It's probably like a third or fourth step. And there are companies and products that bake this in to their decision making throughout their companies so that they can stay relevant, they can stay ahead of the game when they're developing maybe intra-entrepreneurs, right? You're inside an organization, like in a skunkworks type of setup, if you're familiar with that, to be able to ideate and create awesome products. Okay, I'm going to pause. Any questions before I move on? All right? So there's a trick question that I'm going to put to you guys now, that there's anybody that's used the business model canvas, think for a quick second, what, maybe just off the top of your head, is there anything that's not on the business model canvas that you're like, in the process that I would go through, I should do this first? Any ideas? I saw some hands. So I'll just jump right to it, and it's market research. There's not a section on that BMC, if you look back in your notes or take a look at that document, that tells you, do your research. But I'm here telling you, do your research. That's one of the first steps, right? How do you come up with hypotheses? Well, again, this is something that, remember, 2 out of 3 startups pivot from their original idea. And remember this guy, Isaac Asimov, he said, the most exciting phrases in science is not like eureka, but it's, that's interesting, right? And I could probably go through, spend the rest of the time to go through 5 or 10 different examples of things that were created because they were like, oh, that's odd, we never expected that. So when you're doing testing, that's why you go out and try and validate your assumptions. So where do you start? On the research side, I'll just boil it down to 2 different things: primary research and secondary research. And the ultimate goal, again, is to build a tool, to build things that your customer and users love and they're going to use. So that's what we're talking about today in terms of this lean framework, applying it to that build, measure, learn feedback loop. So what is primary research? What is secondary research? Well, the secondary research is essentially what your size, your population size is. So I have some acronyms up here: TAM, SAM, and SOM. TAM is the total available market. SAM is the segmented available market, and the SOM is your share of that market. Okay? And I'm going to go through one of the ideas as an example, I think, on the next slide or 2. But it's both a top-down and a bottoms-up approach when you're kind of sizing this marketplace. So when you're looking at that landscape, you also want to do that research about your competitors, anybody that's doing something similar. And in this case, what I really want to drill into, those that are trying to identify and solve these problems, is that the status quo is your biggest inhibitor to them using your product. Does that kind of jive with you guys? That whatever people are doing now, even if it's in their best interest to use your beautifully designed app that's so incredible, if they're not actually like communicating well to them or designing something that really matches their pain point, they're not going to use it. They're going to stick with their less efficient process, right? That's just the reality, I think, of based on my personal experience, and probably some others in the room that could be like, yep, I've been there. We've built something that was way better, and nobody used it, right? So what are we looking for? Again, that total available market research can be in 2 ways. You can talk about dollar size, or you can talk about numbers. So actually, I think on my phone I have some of the research I pulled up for the last census in Hawaii was actually about a year ago, right? So with the, let's see, I'm pulling up my notes here real quick. Okay. So there's the aging population issue in Hawaii, right? That's one of the, I forget the actual name of what that project is, but that's one of them, yeah? So when you look at a total available market in terms of who might be users of any product that they're going to be using from us, like as the people, there's about 200,000 people in the state that are 65 and older, okay? Not say suffer from this disease, that's just another example. But in the case that they're older, these are, actually, sorry, that's an example. Okay, hit the reset button. Last census was 236,215, which is about 16.5% of the population, or over 65 in Hawaii, as of last year in July, okay? That's your total available market for anybody that's creating a product for them. And then you go down from there, and you're going to say, well, what's our initial segmented market that we can address? It might be a certain subset of that. Maybe they have some sort of disability or any other defining characteristics. That's the demographic kind of stuff. That's beyond just the initial age breakout, okay? And then, whatever that equals to in terms of what's our initial share is. So it's tough to necessarily let go because I don't know that problem set as well. But if you were to kind of logically just write down the different elements of how you can identify these customers, or these users rather, that's going to be the task that you're going to want to go through. So that's the segmented part. You're going to classify them, and then your share is like, who's going to utilize this? If I were to write, this individual, if I were to think of the perfect individual that's going to be the first user of this product, who is that? That's what that SOM kind of initially is, and then that's that persona that you're going to be building for, okay? One quick interesting stat, we're not alone, okay? We're not alone in this issue that there's an aging population. Did you know? Did you know? It's true that Japan sells more adult diapers than actual infant diapers. And their population is also 25% over 65. I think that was a couple years ago. And it's projected to be the average median age is 53 in 2020. That's pretty crazy. Hawaii is going to be one of the highest states in the nation. So this is actually, a lot of things to consider in relation to this. Going back real quick to those kind of early adopters, that initial share of market that you're going to talk about, that perfect customer, that perfect user. Just this diffusion, that there's only going to be a certain percentage that are going to use it in the beginning, right? It's not going to be that 236,515. So that's just the law of the people that are going to adopt something new. The reality is it's going to be a much smaller segment. This is really applicable for startup companies because they're going to say, we're going to get 1% of this $20 million market and we're going to be rich. That's what I said is this like top-down approach, which is not necessarily going to go well. It's going to raise these red flags. If you ever pitch a startup idea, you're going to see the VC like tweaking out a little bit. What we want to see is what I call nose counting. Who are the 10 people in this room that I could talk to today that would pay me something for this product, that are for sure going to use it, that I'm going to solve that real pain point? That's that bottoms up. So we're going to say, who are the hundreds, and not just the big market research figures that say, this market's growing, it's $5 billion projected to be in 2020, and it's growing at a combined annual growth rate of 10% per year. Like, those are the big numbers that you'll see on slide decks, you'll see on TechCrunch, you'll see on Silicon Valley, show on HBO if you watch it, right? But that brings me to a really important point. Don't build for the average. Don't fall into the trap that you're going to build for the average. And it's an easy trap to fall into. So I'm going to use an example here real quick that I just heard on a podcast. Anybody here of 99% Invisible, a guy named Roman Mars? Well, you should check out the show because it's really fascinating. He goes through how things are designed in our world and just asks basic questions and uses history to kind of talk through it. So I think it's second or third most popular podcast on iTunes. The story that he mentioned in a podcast the other day is this. In 1950, the U.S. Air Force hired somebody to look into a problem because all their guys were crashing. All of their pilots kept crashing their planes and be like, what is going on? What's happening? And what they found, and what he found in his research, because his team researched thousands of airmen on a set of 10 physical criteria, because they identified that it's the cockpit design that's the issue, not the individual. It was the actual design of the aircraft. And he realized that none of the pilots he measured were average on all 10, none of them. So if you look at 10 important things, remember flying an aircraft? Like, it's kind of a big deal, yeah? If you maybe have one thing, I can't reach the altimeter, I can't actually move, like can't brake or do anything, that's not good. And then he said the orange you can't show, but not a single one of them met, and then less than 5% were average, had the actual average of 3 of the characteristics. So what does that mean in this case? Designing something for the average pilot, it was literally designed to fit nobody, right? That's a huge error. That's like a colossal mistake that cost lives, okay? Thankfully, you're probably not going to build software that's going to kill somebody in the next month. Praise the Lord. We'll be thankful for that. You're out of the woods there, so you're already ahead of these guys, okay? But I want you to ask 6 questions before you're going to build in any scenario, okay? These 6 questions. What is the one problem I'm trying to solve? Problem isolation will allow you to focus, to get down to the nitty-gritty, that you're not trying to say, I want to try and solve all these problems, because there's going to be a lot. You're going to unearth a lot of things like, oh man, that's really broken. I can't not fix it. I can't not do it. No, you have to resist the urge, prioritize, and execute. Okay? Customer. Who's your ideal customer? Remember that kind of share market? That individual that you would kind of wrote up a persona? So what I do with my startup companies is I actually take a picture, I write a description, and I name them so that when we're actually building something, we're looking at on the wall and we see, okay, James Bond, we're building this product for you. This is the exact watch that he wants, and whatever that might be. So who's your customer? Know what the status quo is. How are people trying to solve this today? If you were to literally write out on a piece of paper how they're actually going through any kind of the solving a related or tangential problem, even if that's the case, what does that look like? So what do people do today in the absence of your proposed solution? And experience. Again, this is priority. Can I move the needle on what actually really matters for my customer segment, for this demographic? And can I create even an awesome experience, right? If you can do that, that's like the going above and beyond. Why is now the right time? And what we also ask our startup teams is, are you the right team? Is now the right time? Are you the right team, and why? Okay? So those are important critical thinking paths that you need to go down. Technology. Do you have the technical capabilities? This comes into the team, right? Do you actually have the skills to do it? We have everybody in the room. I know a lot of great developers that are here that can tackle some amazing problems. And is there certain access maybe that hasn't already been provided to you or showcased that you're going to need? And how do you get that? And if you can't get it, how do you actually get to a point where you can solve something that's maybe a little less or go to a different one? Because that's mission critical for accomplishing your task. Okay? So remember, the goal is that you don't want to build something. You don't want to be the one guy in the room you're the only one using it. You think it's the most amazing thing. Because I'm going to tell you, I've seen it. I've seen a lot of guys that just software developers love to build. You love to write that beautiful, beautiful code. But I want to tell you, that beautiful, beautiful code, if nobody sees it on the front end, I think it's Sergey Brin that said, I don't do HTML, okay? Well, the reality is all of us interact with HTML every single day. So from that standpoint, you're going to want people that are going to use your product, yeah? That's a great thing to get it out there, to see what people think, and be like, huh. Now, I know Jason, I saw Jason here, he's an engineer with Hobnob. I think he worked on the Civic City or Hack the City, and he built this cool data visualization tool that took the live data from the races and showed what everybody was spending their money on in a visual way, because all that information is out there. I was a campaign treasurer for 3-4 years. All that information is there. It's publicly available from the day that you post it, but it's really hard to digest that info, right? You need a user interface and somebody to make it look pretty to get quick learnings. That's where that design piece comes in, and that's a huge value. All right, so remember we're going to talk about value proposition, customer segments, and the relationship between the two. That's what we're going to run through for the last part of our presentation. How am I doing on time? I'm about 30 minutes in. I got an hour, right? Yeah. All right. So, contrary maybe to what you might think or to other opinions, all governments are not quite like this guy. Somebody else's government is probably like that. Especially the reason you're here means that our government's not acting like that. They're saying, let's come. We have problems to solve. Let's encourage and engage the community. Unfortunately, I kept this one in because I thought it was funny. I don't know if you can see this too well, but I see this all the time. Okay? I'll give you a second to read it. All right, so he comes and he's like, I had a great idea for a startup. So all I need is a seed investor and a developer. And what does she say? She's like, I'm pretty sure you have absolutely squat. You got nothing. That's totally the case. I'm sure any engineers in hand can be like, how many times you got pitched an idea? You're like, I'd rather work on my own idea because I'm smarter than you are. No. All right. That was a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer. I got you. All right, so the definition of what the value proposition is, what product or service are you building, and for who and what does it solve a problem or satisfy a need for? I'm going to talk about the problem versus need in two ways. Are you doing the painkiller in terms of solving somebody's pain or matching an emotional need? Do you think Facebook solves this huge need? It's really more of an emotional connection for humans that they're doing. It's not this massive problem like curing cancer or things. There's not that. But what you want to get to is is what I'm building needed or wanted by the customers or even the users at the other end. All right? So there's this guy, okay? So he got a sweater from grandma and he's not too stoked about it. He's not the right customer. But this guy, Mr. Alex Burgo, if anybody knows Alex, it's not actually him, but it kind of looks like him, says, yes, thank you for the sweater. That's who you want to actually get that reaction from people that are engaging with the products that you build, all right? So the characteristics of what a value proposition entails, what is good? How do you know that you're there? It's got to be unique, okay? The value proposition is specifically related to that, to your product and the tool that you're trying to build, and it needs to resonate. And how do you know if it resonates? Not a rhetorical question. How do you know if it resonates? Well, okay, so I think I heard him say that you go talk to your customers and they say that they liked it. That's what I think. Good answer. All right. So you got to go out and get out of the building. That's that phrase. Remember that Steve Blanket said, you got to get out of the building. Go talk to the people that are potentially going to be using this, hopefully, right? You don't want to be that guy in that room building for no beautiful software that nobody uses. And make it simple and understandable. Don't necessarily let your mastery of the English language run away with you. Just keep things simple and understandable for the audience. So where do you start? You're not going to go onto the Google. You're not necessarily going to have this massive brainstorming session, sit in the room with you and your team and be like, we got it. You're going to actually maybe do a little bit of that, but then you don't just copy somebody else. You go out and you talk to your customers. So again, Russell, I'm going to ask you a question. How do you know if your product's any good or your idea? How do you know? Talk to your customers. Okay. I think we're getting through. We're getting through. Some quick examples of value propositions of products that you might use today, yesterday, every day, I don't know. But they're really simple ways that you can just distill it down. I don't have the slides on this, but it's not a slogan, right? Everybody knows the brand Nike. Everybody probably loves Nike. What's their slogan? That's not a value proposition. That doesn't, I think theirs is something like impeccable athletic wear. I don't remember exactly what it is. I'll butcher it if I try and remember it. But it tells very simply exactly kind of what you're trying to do. Again, these are examples, not necessarily as applicable for our 5 ideas here. They're going to be naturally a little bit more verbs in there, or words, to communicate it. But what you want to do is test that value proposition, write out 4 or 5 different examples, go to the potential customers and users and be like, can you actually tell me what this is going to do for you, right? So pitching by analogy is one way that it's just an easy way to remember something. It's like, oh, we're the Uber for this, or we're GitHub for algorithms. That's like the algorithm, our company, Algorithm Hub. They're basically saying we're the GitHub for algorithms, and that kind of make sense. People here in the room will be like, I don't know exactly what that means. But I have a book that I've read probably every year for the last 10 years, and it's called Get Your Message Across in 30 Seconds or Less. So I think any idea can be distilled down with a certain formula to be communicated in half a minute. I think that's possible, and that takes time, though. Your first cut, probably not going to be there. Probably going to take a little bit of iteration on that. And talking to customers, getting out of the building, okay? So Facebook example of their value proposition, and you're going to see, this is the business model canvas, yeah? There are 3 different colors. Our projector doesn't quite communicate that super well. It's like lime green, mustard green, and teal or whatever. But they're saying you want to connect with your friends, discover and learn. The second one is reach, relevance, social context, engagement, personalized and social experiences, social distribution, and payments. The first one is you and I, the broad customer, broad consumer. The second one is advertisers, the value that they give Facebook, right? Facebook makes billions of dollars in ads. So does Google, yeah? And the last one, I think, is their development individuals that are developing tools on top of their platform. All right. So I have a couple different exercises, but I'm going to just actually blow through them that you can take these and do them on your own time, because I wanted to give you that so when you actually tackle these problems on your own, you're going to be able to kind of have a little bit of a playbook, okay? So really the first step on this exercise is just to do that same thing in that brainstorm session. Write down what you think all your value props are, and we're going to talk about who those customer segments are. For Facebook, they were what? Us, the broad consumer, people that want to connect. Initially, it was only Harvard students, right? Only Harvard students at Story. Right now, that's my initial customer. And actually, it's their user, because your customer is the one that pays you money. Who here pays for Facebook? Nobody, right? It's free. It's a free product. But when you are not paying for it, you are the product being sold. Does that make sense? My data is what's being sold to that advertiser, okay? So customer, I use the word customer and user kind of interchangeably. Sometimes they're the same. Other times they're different. In Facebook's case, they're different, all right? So anybody, can I move on? Does anybody have this that wants it? Okay. So customer segments. So we talked first about value propositions, right? What is the product or service that you're trying to build? And who? This answers the who. Who are my customers? All right, it's not quite this simple. It's not quite that nursery rhyme simple in terms of just going out and saying, are you my customer? Anybody in the room? Well, it takes a little bit more digging. You're going to apply your intuition. You're going to apply what? The research, the secondary research, which is like all those numbers on Google, all those reports, and then the nose counting, that primary research, which includes you going out of the building and talking to who you think your users and customers are. So, really important point here on the bottom. Customers do not exist to buy from you. You exist for them. You are solving problems for the constituents, for the individuals of these 5 different problems. So that's what your job is, not necessarily to just get them to use the products that you built. So what do you do when you're trying to figure out who your customer segments are? You're going to ask a few questions, right? Something like this. What job are they trying to get done? All right? What are the pains that they're trying to solve or the gains that they're trying to create for them? There's a brief exercise that I'm going to include at the end of this section that really, really helps you get to the learnings from this, all right? So I want you to kind of be ready to get that. All right, so you've seen this before, right? Build, measure, learn. Yeah, what's the other part of that? The HERA. I heard a HERA process. It is the HERA process, all right? Hypothesis, experiments, results, and action. The HERA process. The build, measure, learn. So your customer segments are in which part of this activity? They're on the measure part initially. So sometimes there's a phrase we use called MVP. Anybody know what MVP stands for? Most valuable player, true. Yes, yes. Depends on the context. Minimum viable product, exactly. So if you MVP, quick side note here, okay? So MVP does not mean you have to have 10,000 lines of code to make it be an MVP. That's not the case at all. You actually might not even need code. So me, as a non-engineer, as a non-technical person, I can hack together an MVP based on existing tools to communicate the value that I'm pitching to propose to my potential customers with PowerPoint, with my own phone, with pen and paper. That's done first, and then I get feedback, and then I can go to Russell and be like, hey, Russell, I got this great idea. I talked to 100 people. They really like it. Here's the feedback. This is the features I'm thinking about. Can you help me build it? And he'd be like, yeah, man, that sounds awesome. Let's go, work together and hopefully make some money. That sounds fun, all right? That's where that measuring comes in. So your MVP is stage 1, your measurement, and then what you learn is like alpha. And then you do it again, and then you have beta. And you do it again, you have beta 2.0, and then you launch. Does that make sense? Okay, that's more or less in the startup space. But going back to the Facebook example, customer segments. Remember I mentioned those 3 value props? And we have our customer segments are the internet, the users, the people that are on the World Wide Web. The second one is advertisers and marketers. Do you remember which one's the user and which one's the customer? All right, the one that pays is the customer, and the first one, us, we're the users. And developers are that other, in this case, either it could be a customer segment because Facebook is really interested in working with developers to develop on their platform, but it could also be a key partner in their ecosystem. So when you're actually trying to figure out these customer segments, one of the key things that I might have mentioned, it's called get out of the building, right? You got to go talk to them. So having those conversations, knowing what your hypotheses are, and then you're going to experiment by having a conversation with them, and based upon your learnings, you're going to take revised action, okay? So just a quick note, your interviews are hard. They're not easy. They're not fun. Until they get easier, then they're really fun. Because once you start seeing, their eyes get like, whoa, and they start being ready to be like, how much, is this ready right now? Can I pay you for this? Can I use this today? In these cases of our hack challenge over the next month, they're like, oh, is this available? Can I go onto the site and get this right now? You start getting that kind of feedback, that's why face-to-face is really important, because you can get that nonverbal communication. You can kind of see into their eyes what their reaction is to your pitch, to your value propositions. So that's where this says it's really hard at the beginning, but when you get to product market fit, they're easier. So push through. I would encourage everybody that's working on one of these for the next month that you at least talk to 10 people in the next 7 to 10 days. Just try and do some of these exercises and talk to them, because I will bet you that your learning will make you build a better product. And we all want to build better products, right? So I would challenge everybody that's participating to do that. Everybody know who Jack Dorsey is, Twitter CEO and founder. He says if you want to build a product that is relevant to folks, relevant to these customer segments, you need to put yourself in their shoes, okay? And you need to write a story from their side. That's a tactic that he uses. And the story can be in a number of different ways. Like agile methodology in terms of development people use user stories through different cards or whatever that they're able to go from. It just depends on the definition. Okay, a lot of info. Customer segment how-tos. I'm going to let you just kind of read through a quick of these while I take a quick drink of water. All right. So again, these are notes that you can take home with you. I wanted to include them just because I wanted to give you as much ammunition as possible to take this and put it into action practically. So you want to develop some of those user narratives, which I kind of talked about, right? If I was to think through and put myself in the seat of the user, how they're trying to solve this problem today, you're going to have your own hypotheses, but you're going to get the best learnings when you talk to them and you understand what are the different tools they use, how's the process they go about it today. Remember, one of the biggest enemies of people using your product is what? The status quo, what they're doing today. And is it enough of value to make them change this behavior? You know, habits, they do all these studies, right? Like how long it takes for you to change a habit, how many times do you need to actually like do something to remember it. And repetition is the name of the game. Continuous or really that wow experience that pushes it beyond, I might use it, or I have to have this today, tomorrow, tell your boss, get this to me now, okay? So that's the first one, those user narratives. I got a typo there, but customer discovery and interviews, do a lot of them. The more you do, the better you're going to get at it, the more quality data. Going back to that scientist, right? We have a phrase called beware the sound of one hand clapping. If you only talk to one person, they're like, yeah, I really love that idea. You're like, great, I'm going to go build, close the door and go just build for the next week. No, you want to, the more people you talk to that's in that customer segment, the better your data is, the better your decision making is, the better your product is going to be, okay? So we kind of have a basic, heuristic that we want to get to 100. That's about a basis for what we tell our startups. Now, there's examples of guys that have done thousands. There's an example that the Ash Maurya book that I mentioned, Running Lean, he actually says looking for directional indicators in the beginning is that kind of minimum 10. Get to that baseline 10, and you're going to have pretty strong indicators that will at least tell you whether your BS, like just keep that kind of BS radar open. Is you're like, am I way off here, or am I close enough that it's, okay, let's put some energy behind it, let's put some gas, pedal to the metal, so to speak, on that. All right. Asking why, this has been around for thousands of years, people getting to the root causes of things. When you actually have a problem you're faced with, ask why 5 times in a row, and I guarantee you're going to get to an additional level of learning on what that core issue is that you can then focus, prioritize, and execute, all right? Studying psychology, that always helps, user behavior, how people, sociology, that kind of stuff. You have a question? Empathy maps. Yes, empathy, we said empathy maps, exactly. That's right up that alley. So again, don't stopping at that gut feeling assumption. Experimentation is doing what? Oh gosh, thank you so much. I was going to walk out of the door. I was like, I can't do it. Talking to your customers. All right, so that's where the experimentation is. Getting out of the building. Thank you so much. Stephen, all-star. Okay, take-home exercises. You guys didn't know you were going to have homework, did you? Oh, it's too bad. It's too bad. All right, customer segment homework is this. Look up Value Proposition Canvas video by Strategizer. That's Strategizer with a Y, not an I. They produce a lot of great content. Check that out. You're going to do this kind of exercise to identify what the pains are, gains, and jobs to be done. Once you watch that video, it's going to be crystal clear. They call it the Value Proposition Canvas, and it's going to point you directly to your value proposition on one side and your customer segments on the other side. The product you're creating to solve this need, the pain point they have, and details of it. And you fill that out and you match them together. And you don't do that just based on your own hypotheses, but you get out of the building, okay? That customer workflow, this will all make sense once you actually watch those videos. The resulting customer archetype, going back to some of these empathy maps, which matches to that user persona that you'd originally kind of mocked up. You're going to do some more of that learning by getting out of the building and talking to people to feed back into this iterative loop, which just adds more data to who that actual customer archetype is, who that person is. So how do they solve problems today? What is the thing? Status quo, right, guys? How they're doing it today is really, really important. Because the tools that they're using and their regular way in which going about things, it's hard to convince them or to really add that value that's going to get them to change their routines. So just a pro tip, okay? Right here, the video, just go to Google and put it in, you'll find it. I didn't have the link for it, but just want to let you guys know that. That's my little sarcastic link there. So we're down to the last part. Drum roll to the relationship between the value propositions and your customer segments is called the product market fit. And really, not much else matters because that's kind of like, goal that you want to get to. Back to a great cartoon to try and lead off with some of those. So Dilbert's marketing wisdom. Let's have a second to read it. For everybody online, if everyone exposed to a product likes it, the product will not succeed. And then he's in a meeting at lunch or whatever. He's talking about the reason that a product everyone likes will fail is because no one loves it. It's just this like circular thinking silliness. So what is the definition of this product market fit? Well, it's when your minimum viable product, essentially, we talk about what that is, how you come to that, matches those customer archetypes, those needs and wants and desires, and you get some like traction. And traction can be identified and represented in a couple different things, okay? Customers paying you real money, if this is a business endeavor. Insane user growth can also be a business endeavor one as well, or the high product usage. So once you roll this out to a certain subset or something, they're actually using it, it's baked into part of their processes. If it's something that's available to the general public, sometimes it's a discovery issue, which is a separate kind of marketing problem, which is not for today's conversation, but it's how that's distributed out to them. So there's a communication gap that needs to be addressed to be able to make sure that the right people are using your product. But that's what you're looking for. That's kind of the holy grail of things, is traction. People using it, people paying for it, an exchange of value is made. So I included this just for general learning purposes, the 3 stages that I see of a startup. Before we get to that product market fit, there's a lot of times something else that we call the problem solution fit. So you have an initial problem set, you develop a very basic solution. Where you're at before that is pre-traction, is kind of like an MVP stage still yet, where you're actually getting some feedback that yes, from my interviews, from my learnings, this is what people are really wanting. And then you give them some software or something to work with. And once they actually use it, you can test it, do another round of interviews. There's a whole playbook, guys, of what you ask in the interviews in the book Running Lean. All right, so if you're interested in that, go check that book out. I think it's $15-20 on Amazon. It will be worth it because of the practicality of putting these things into action. He boils it down really well. The second one is that product market fit. Have you built something that people want and are exchanging value? They're either paying you or they're using it regularly. There's certain metrics, right, that Facebook uses called like daily active users or monthly active users. You'll see startups throw those numbers around all the time. The reality is when you're actually creating a habit, a lot of times you have to do something like every day or every couple days for that to be such a habitual thing. I mean, the numbers that if we were to have on our own phones, and there's apps that can tell you that, how many times you check whatever your favorite social network is. If it's Facebook, it's a lot. I think everybody can probably agree to that. Now, coming back to this is an important point about that product market fit. When you're ready to put kind of some of the gasoline on the fire, don't do it until you have some of that product market fit feedback. And it's here at the bottom. Decide what you sell to whom. You're going to stack the odds. You're going to try and find that unfair advantage. Again, this is pure startup speak on this slide here. So some of these things I'm just including for the audience that you guys can take it. And Sean Ellis is the guy who created this. And then you're ready for that growth. You're ready to scale. So the companies that you'll see, there's a company called Vibi, or not Vibi, I forget the name of it. It was like a video product that went to like 10 million users, and they show this graph that goes up to here, and then like the next like 3 months they go down because they probably did too many, like a marketing gimmick, and they didn't have a real product solving a real problem, and nobody was paying them anything, so people lost a lot of money, and they went bankrupt. Okay, Facebook example, back to that product market fit phase. I'll just read this for the audience and for those on the web. So your value propositions, going back to that, was that connecting with your friends, discover, learn, and express. Matches to your customer segments. This is how they all kind of relate. So when you're talking, this is exactly what I need. A marketer's like, if you can give me more granular data to be able to put the best ads together to communicate my business to these people in the most segmented market possible, that's hugely valuable for me. Okay? So that's where these things match. Put them on the same slide. I'm almost done, all right? We'll have about 10 minutes of questions. We're almost there. Nir Eyal, so another book to check out. It's a book called Hooked. It's about building habit-forming products. He says one aspect that's common to any problem set that you have, any of these constituents that you're trying to build products for today or the next month, is that they successfully these innovations solve a real problem. So I'm going to recap a little bit. There's too much, I know, okay? But let me sum it up. Sum up some of our key points here, all right? One of those key points, this is one slide. This is the sum up slide, okay? It doesn't have the hera. It Doesn't have the hero, but it does, implicitly, I guess, with this build, measure, learn feedback loop. So talk to your customers before you build the world's most beautiful Rails app, okay? Please, just get out of the building, go talk to them. Talk to your partners that you're working with in the government, really understand what some of their discovery is. They might have done a lot of discovery already, and if that's the case, you just validate that and you can sprint. But I think it would be for your own benefit to actually go through the processes to talk to who some of them are and have them help you do that, okay? So talk to them, do this build, measure, learn feedback loop, hypothesis, experiment, results in action for the win. Now, so this is the partnership that you guys have engaged in. I said at the beginning that in my view, I think anybody participating in HACC should approach this. Basically, you are a consultant for the government in the state of Hawaii over the next 30 days. And your role is to work with them, your customer, to build amazing products for the user, for might even be me, or others that are identified, the homeless constituents, the aging population, of what we can do for them. These are real problems in our society. I highly, highly applaud the people from the government of the state of Hawaii. In fact, let's just give them a round of applause. They did an amazing job putting this event together. It requires a lot of work. It does. Anybody, like, you see people in the shirts, awesome shirts, just give them a pat on the back. Just be like, get some rest tomorrow. Okay? So I just wanted to end with saying thank you very much for allowing me to present the Lean framework. We'll be around if we want to pause for any questions or complete our recording.
You got a couple more minutes. So
okay.
If you have questions, you can take them now.
Have any questions? Yeah.
So how do you turn a free product into a market to say? Just something like I have an app that's built. The 30-second slogan is 87.7 million users can find their phone using one word.
Okay.
And I put it in the market for free. So how do you turn that into revenue?
Gotcha. So just to repeat the question for people on the recording as well as anybody in the audience, and correct me if I get it a little bit wrong, but it's basically, I have a free product, how do I make money? Is that right? So there's a really good book. Again, I hate to say just always reference these books, but it'll deep dive for you. I'm going to answer your question real briefly. But it's basically, I forget the author, but it's free. Just look at like the economics of free. And it's this whole new way in which products are being sold, and it's called the freemium model. So when you look at one thing also that's not necessarily articulated on the business model canvas, we talked about market research. It's not necessarily on there. It's implied in the data. But your business model, right? So a business model is just like, how are you making money? And we at Accelerate UH and Sultan Ventures talk a lot about unit economics. What are your unit economics, and how much does it how much does it cost you to acquire a customer, your customer acquisition cost, and what's your lifetime value? So when you determine who's going to pay you money, because there has to be an exchange of value, if you're looking for users, a freemium model typically will be subsidized by advertising. That's how the internet is run from the beginning. Now that's something that you need a really big population to make those numbers work, okay? So if you look at whatever the CPMs are for YouTube, right? Your cost per 1,000 impressions, if you're going to do a Google AdWords campaign, there's going to be some sort of engine that's going to, how do customers find out about your app? What are you doing? Are you doing any kind of content generation online? We call that inbound marketing or SEO kind of components, right? Or are you going to do a social media of just the most, crazy social media campaign, which, not to just diss that, like Dollar Shave Club. Everybody's heard of Dollar Shave Club? They were just bought by Unilever for like $1 billion+ acquisition. Their first kind of customer acquisition strategy was a viral video on YouTube. You know what Dropbox did in their first couple months to get customers? They created a video that kind of went semi-viral on like Hacker News, which is like Y Combinator's news site. So there's tons of different ideas you can do to get customers, and once you get them in, what are you looking for? If you were to say, hey, Mr. Advertiser, just with the advertising freemium model, right? I've got 5,000 daily active users. They're this type of customer demographic. Would you like to throw up a banner on my app? You know what? That's a terrible experience for us as the user. It sucks, right? Especially on these tiny little phones, and you're like, I would just actually want to use it. I don't want to go to this crappy clickbait site. Because these ad networks throw stuff on there that's just also your brand. People are experiencing your product. They don't want to get a pop-up app or a pop-up ad. But there's an app I've been using lately called Headspace. And what they do is it helps you meditation app and stuff. So they go through this 10-day kind of exercise. After that, it's habit-forming products, how to create that. Once you get invested, okay, then I say, I'm going to offer you a premium product, okay? So it's free for 99%, but the 1%, look at all these features you're going to get and how awesome it is. This best, meditation guru, he can be available to you on this day for 30 minutes to help you. Holy cow, I'll pay $10 a month to be able to get that. You understand what I'm saying? So freemium is about probably usually 99% are free, and the 1% are going to pay. So think about ways to do that. Yeah.
Not only that, but if you have an app or service that's using ads to generate revenue, if you offer that 1%, a premium service that doesn't have those ads, Pandora Radio, for example, I listen to Pandora and it has those annoying ads interrupting my music now and then. If I pay a monthly fee for the service, I don't have to hear those ads. Most people would rather have the free and then you're getting money from those ads, but the people who are paying for the service without ads, it's a premium service. You're making money from that too.
Absolutely. So just to kind of repeat, because it's a great comment, so for those listening on the web, when you have that opportunity, you can be able to essentially say, pay to remove the ads or to experience the product. There's one thing that I will mention on that is customer choice. You're giving them a choice. You're creating this great product. You spent money to build the app. You took time to do it. You hope to actually generate income from it in this case, right? So again, that kind of startup. Just as a note, in terms of the mobile app store is one of the hardest places to get discovered. App Store optimization, it's a little bit of a black box, and you are solely reliant upon Apple in whatever their stuff is, so it's tough. So web apps can be a way to do it. But that note of choice. So I recently did a flight on an airline called Jetstar. And Jetstar flies to Australia primarily, but what they do is they say, well, here's the base fare. Okay, and then you can a la carte choose all these things. I had to choose to sit next to my wife on the flight, for crying out loud, okay? But the flight was insanely cheap. It was like it was 400 something bucks base price to go to Australia, right? It's cheaper to go to than go to the mainland. So, but they're going to charge you per kilogram for your bag. They're going to charge you if you order ahead of time. So there's all these things that if we look at it sometimes, I'm like, oh, that's really annoying. They're just nickel and diming me. But no, if I'm that marketing guy, I'm going to say, you know what? We at Jetstar provide you exactly what you want and need. We're going to get you from point A to point B. And not only that, we're going to give you the choice to choose what kind of experience you want on this airline. And we're going to give you all the basics. We have a brand new Airbus Dreamliner. It's beautiful. There's beautiful graphics. We're going to have the great service that you expect. But if I walk down that aisle with the food cart, which just happened to me, and they're like, sir, would you like some coffee? I'm like, yeah, I'd love some. That'll be $4, please. I'm like, I don't want some. No, thanks. Not today, It was $4 Australian, so it might have been like, I don't know, like $3.25 or something. But so we got maybe one more question. Otherwise, we can end on that. Anybody else? Thank you guys so much.